Have you ever been judged before people even knew your name? Have you ever watched injustice unfold right in front of you and wondered what you would have done if it were you? On a quiet morning flight from Los Angeles to New York, the cabin of first class was filled with soft jazz and the rustle of newspapers. Then, without warning, a sound cut through the calm a slap. 3 young black boys, barely 9 years old, sat frozen in their seats. Across from them stood a well-dressed white woman, trembling with anger, convinced she had been disrespected, and the world stopped. But moments later, when their mother arrived calm, powerful, and unmistakably composed, the air shifted. Because this wasn't just any mother. This was Dr. Naomi Carter, the CEO of the very airline they were flying with. What would you have done if it were your children? Would you have screamed, fought back, demanded justice, or chosen a different kind of power? This is not just a story about a slap on a plane. It's a story about prejudice, grace, and what happens when strength meets compassion. It's about a woman who could have destroyed everything in rage, but instead chose to rebuild something greater. Before we begin this journey, take a breath, open your heart, and imagine what would you do if it happened to you. If this story touches something inside you, please take a moment to like, share, and subscribe, because what you're about to hear may just change how you see the world. A dry, clanging sound echoed through the first-class cabin. The sound tore through the silence like a knife cutting through velvet. All eyes turned to row 2, where a white woman with carefully curled blonde hair stood up abruptly. Her hands were shaking, but her eyes were angry, sharp as broken glass. "This boy just tried to take my bag," she screamed, her voice rising above the sound of the engine. Before her stood a small, thin black boy of about 9 years old, his eyes wide with fear. He couldn't say a word, just stood there, still holding the small blue rubber ball in his hand, the toy he always carried with him when he was nervous. His right cheek had a red handprint. The woman spoke again, this time lower, but full of sarcasm. Children like that shouldn't be in first class. The air was thick. The other passengers sat still, as if afraid of getting into trouble. A middle-aged white man cleared his throat and returned to reading his newspaper. The boy bowed his head, his lips trembling. Beside him, the triplets, Micah and Noah, were also silent, their eyes confused. They looked at each other, not understanding what was happening. A flight attendant approached, petite, her Latina face bright in the light. Her name tag read Sarah Vega. Her voice was calm and soft. "Ma'am, I need you to calm down. This is just a boy, and he has done nothing wrong." The woman turned around, giving him a cold look. "Didn't you see? He was leaning over my chair. I've told you a dozen times. I don't want anyone touching my things." Sarah sighed softly, glancing at the 3 children. Eli, the boy who had been slapped, was still clutching the ball, his shoulders shaking slightly. I just picked it up. "Ma'am," he stammered. His voice was so low that I had to lean in to hear it. Sarah leaned down slightly and spoke slowly, word by word. "It's okay. Eli, I'm here." But the woman didn't seem to want to stop. "For heaven's sake, are you defending him? I paid over $3,000 for this seat, to sit next to 3 noisy black kids." From the back of the compartment, a few people turned to look, their eyes filled with a mixture of annoyance and confusion. A younger white woman whispered, "Ma'am, please, they're just kids." But she brushed it off. "You don't understand. Everything is upside down these days. Someone like me sitting with people like this, I can't believe it." Sarah clenched her fists, trying to stay calm. She had dealt with many difficult passengers, but none had ever crossed the line like this. In a low but firm voice, she said, "Mrs. Langston, I'm going to ask you to sit down. The police will be notified when we land. You just assaulted a minor." The woman rolled her eyes. "Police? Are you kidding? My name is Margaret Langston. My family finances half of Atlanta. You think a few kids and a flight attendant can do anything to me?" Sarah didn't reply. She just put her hand on Eli's shoulder, reassuring him. At that moment, unbeknownst to anyone, the small watch on her wrist was vibrating gently, an emergency signal to the cockpit. From the loudspeaker, the captain's voice rang out, calm but decisive. "Chief Flight Attendant, please confirm an incident at row 2A. Send a report to the ground immediately." Sarah pressed the answer button, her voice trembling slightly. "Confirmed. There was abuse of a minor passenger. The victim is Dr. Naomi Carter's child." Silence fell again. The name, Naomi Carter, stunned the captain for a few seconds. He knew very well this was not just any passenger. This was the CEO of Liberty Air, the woman who had built the airline from scratch, the woman the entire crew respected. He said only one sentence: "Prepare for the CEO's arrival. Remain in position, under the soft white light." Eli looked at his brothers, trying to hold back tears. Micah gently placed a hand on his shoulder. "It's okay. Mom will know," Noah whispered, so low that only the two of them could hear. "Do you think Mom will be angry?" Micah shook his head. "No. Mom will be calm. But the other one, probably not." In the front row, Margaret was still sitting upright, her face full of complacency. She didn't know that, in the VIP lounge less than 30 yards away, a black woman in a dark blue suit had just stood up, her eyes shining coldly. The secretary asked quietly, "Dr. Carter." "The meeting with the finance board is still," Naomi said only one sentence. "The meeting can wait. My child cannot." She took her CEO badge and strode toward the boarding gate. Her high heels tapped softly on the floor, as determined as her heartbeat calm, but burning within. The plane was still silent. Inside, the storm of emotions was just beginning. The morning in Atlanta was chilly and damp. Sunlight streamed through the Liberty Air building's glass windows like a thin veil. In her 40th floor office, Dr. Naomi Carter sat quietly by the window, watching planes take off in waves on the runway in the distance. Beside her was a cold cup of black coffee and a small cup for the one who had just passed away, her husband, Daniel Carter, the captain who had died in an accident 7 years earlier. Every morning, Naomi set the cup down on the table as a ritual reminder to live on, to be strong, to soar above the pain. The watch on her wrist vibrated, reminding her of her finance committee meeting at 8. She still had 10 minutes to take a deep breath and calm herself. As soon as she picked up the phone, Micah's name appeared on the screen. She smiled. "Hello, my big boy. Have you had breakfast yet?" Micah's voice rang out clearly. "Yes, Mom. I'm going to help Eli check his suitcase one last time. He keeps forgetting his robot." Naomi laughed, her voice as soft as a spring breeze. "Don't worry too much. Today is an important day. I want you to enjoy your trip," Eli chimed in, his voice low and slightly shaky. "Mom, I brought the ball." Okay, Naomi could tell he was nervous. "Take it with you. When you feel your heart beating fast, squeeze it and remember what I said. Calmness is strength, not weakness." On the other end of the line, Eli replied softly. Yes, I will. Noah, the youngest, grabbed the phone. Mom, do you think our robot will win? Naomi laughed even louder. If it brings joy to others, then even without a trophy, we are still winners. The call ended, and Naomi put the phone down, her heart filled with pride. She was not just the CEO of a billion-dollar airline. She was the mother of 3 children who taught her how to fly high without fear of falling. Those 3 children were the remnants of Daniel in her, the light that helped her through the sleepless nights of work and the silent battles with prejudice. The door opened, and her secretary Linda entered with a thick stack of documents. The board is waiting for you in the main conference room. They want to hear about the international expansion plan. Naomi nodded. She adjusted her suit jacket, pinning on a small silver wing pin, the one her husband had worn. Thank you, Linda. After this meeting, I'll be heading to the airport. My kids are on Flight 447 to Los Angeles. I want to see them off at the door. Linda smiled, her eyes filled with admiration. You have always been a wonderful mother. Naomi. She only replied with a vague smile. As she entered the meeting room, Naomi transformed into a different person, cool, focused, strong. Her voice was low but firm, each sentence carrying weight. Liberty Air will not just be an airline, but a bridge between people and their dreams. The words silenced the room. The CFOs looked at her, some nodding, others making quick notes in their notebooks. Naomi ended her presentation to a moderate round of applause, quiet but respectful. When everyone stood, she remained seated for a few seconds, staring at the last slide on the screen. Fly with dignity. Fly with dignity, the slogan she chose when she restructured the airline. She remembered the early days when people laughed, a black woman as CEO of an airline. No way. But now, Liberty Air was a symbol of integrity and humanity. Stepping out of the conference room, she called the control room. Make sure Flight 447 departs on time. 3 little passengers with the last name Carter. Please give them special assistance. Her voice was soft, but everyone understood it as an order. The clock read 10. Naomi stopped at the lobby cafe and ordered an espresso, no sugar. She liked the bitter taste on her tongue mixed with the smell of jet fuel outside the window. It was the taste of reality, strong, harsh, but real. A young employee recognized her and hesitantly walked over. Dr. Carter, I just wanted to say thank you. I just received a scholarship from the Liberty Foundation. Thanks to that program, I will become an aeronautical engineer. Naomi smiled and patted the girl on the shoulder. Use this opportunity to pave the way for others. When we take off, don't forget to take someone with us. The girl nodded, her eyes shining with confidence. Naomi watched, her heart warming. An intercom call flashed on the screen. Captain Blake, Flight 447 is ready. Naomi smiled. Perfect. I'll be right out. She gathered her files and walked out of the office, the light streaming through the long glass windows, reflecting off her face, bright, calm, confident. As she made her way to Gate D12, Naomi thought back to the first flights she ever piloted. Every time she took off, she feared that one day she would not return like Daniel. But she chose to continue anyway, because she believed that no one should be limited by fear or the color of their skin. She recalled a television interview a few years ago. When the host asked, "What makes you different?" Naomi replied, "I don't try to be different. I just don't let other people decide who I am." Now! As she walked past the line of passengers waiting to board the plane, Naomi had no idea that in just a few hours, she would have to repeat it, but not in front of cameras, but in front of hundreds of eyes, in front of the anger and prejudice that was alive and well on the plane that bore her name. She stopped at the window overlooking the runway. 3 planes were taxiing, their tails painted with silver wings. A soft voice came from the loudspeaker Flight 447 to Los Angeles, now boarding at Gate D12. Naomi smiled slightly. "Be safe. Kids?" Little did she know that a few minutes later, when that flight took off, a slap would be heard, a slap that would shake her peaceful sky, bringing with it a tidal wave of prejudice and justice that she herself would be the one to face. And at that moment, deep inside Naomi, the words she taught her children every morning still echoed. Calmness is strength. Those words were about to become the compass that helped her stand firm in the storm that fate was about to throw at her. On the ground, the sun was high, shining through the glass as a reminder that despite the dark clouds, the light was still strong enough to guide the way. That morning, the small house in the northern suburbs of Atlanta was bathed in soft yellow sunlight. The 3 Carter boys woke early, laughter echoing through the kitchen. Micah, the oldest, reminded his 2 younger brothers to check their luggage while brushing his teeth. Eli, remember to bring the robot, and don't forget the charger again. Noah, have you packed your jacket? Noah laughed, his curly hair bouncing. Yes, General Micah. I'm really prepared this time. The 3 of them wore the green uniforms of the Young Innovators Expo, where they would bring their own light robots to display in Los Angeles. At the dining table, Grandma had prepared a simple breakfast: muffins, milk, and fresh strawberries. Eli sat down, still fiddling with the blue rubber ball. It was a small toy his mother had given him to calm him down when he was nervous. Eli, eat, Grandma said softly. Today is an important day. He nodded, his eyes looking far away. I'm scared of meeting so many strangers. I don't know if they'll like our robot. Micah smiled gently. It's okay. I worked hard, Mom said. When you do something with all your heart, others will feel it. Noah kept talking as he ate. I want to meet some famous people. I heard there are even professors from MIT coming. Grandma laughed and patted his head. As long as you don't make people think you're a professor, that's fine. When the shuttle pulled up to the house, the 3 brothers hugged her tightly. Make sure you take your medicine, Micah said. She smiled, her eyes shining. You kids be good too. And don't forget to call me when you get there. On the way to the airport, the car passed through the city center, the tall buildings glittering in the sunlight. Eli looked out the window, his fingers lightly touching the glass. Mom must be busy. Huh, Noah answered immediately. Busy, but she always makes time for me. She said she would see us off at Gate D12 today. He said with absolute trust. Micah said nothing, just smiled, his heart warming. When the car arrived at the airport, the 3 children dragged their suitcases inside. The crowd was dense, and the loudspeaker was constantly blaring. A support staff member recognized them and smiled. You are the Carters. Right. Doctor, Carter sent a special announcement. I will take you to the VIP gate. The 3 nodded in thanks, even though they were young. Their mother had always taught them to be polite to everyone. At the security area, Eli tensed up a bit when the scanner beeped because of the ball in his pocket. The security guard smiled. What is this? Kid Eli was confused. It's just a ball. Mom let me take it to calm down. The guard nodded. Hold it tight. Don't let anyone take it. The joke unintentionally planted a strange premonition of what was to come. After passing through the security checkpoint, the 3 boys stopped in front of the gift shop. Noah pointed to a small model plane, Micah, it looks just like Mommy's plane. Micah smiled. Yeah, maybe we can design our own plane someday. Eli chimed in, his voice small but firm. A plane that flies on solar power, no pollution, no noise. The three of them laughed. In waiting room D12 they sat near the glass doors overlooking the runway. Planes took off continuously, leaving long white trails of smoke in the blue sky. Micah whispered, I think Dad is up there somewhere. They were silent for a moment. Daniel Carter had died when his father was 2 years old. Although he could not remember his father's face clearly, his story was always present in his dreams. A blonde woman walked by, her designer bag swinging from her hand. She looked at the three children with a hint of contempt. Such noisy children get to sit in first class, she muttered, loud enough to be heard. Micah turned away slightly, not responding. Eli bowed his head, his hands clasping the blue ball. Noah frowned, about to respond, but Micah motioned for silence. Never mind. Sarah Vega. The chief flight attendant of Flight 447 walked by with a friendly smile. Are your dad's triplets? How cute. Are you guys traveling alone? Micah nodded. My mom is the CEO of Liberty Air. She'll be here before takeoff. Sarah smiled, her eyes full of sympathy. So I'm talking to the special guests. Don't worry, I'll take care of you. The three brothers felt a little better. Eli looked at Sarah and whispered, If I get scared on the plane, can I talk to you? Sarah gently rubbed his shoulder. Of course, Eli. I used to be scared of flying too, but then I learned that the sky is only scary for those who don't believe in their wings. At that moment, the loudspeaker blared. Flight 447 to Los Angeles is now boarding. First-class passengers, please proceed to the gate. Micah stood up, took a deep breath. Come on, guys. Let's begin the journey. The three of them lined up, their suitcases clattering across the floor. They were unaware that the blonde woman from earlier, Margaret Langston, was also boarding the same flight, sitting in the front row. Her eyes swept over them, cold as ice. Inside the first-class cabin, soft lighting bathed the rows of cream-colored leather seats. Micah helped them put their luggage away and checked their seat belts. Sarah walked over, smiling. Are you okay? All three nodded. Thank you. Eli looked out the window, his voice low. Mom says every flight is an opportunity to learn something new. Noah smiled. So I guess I'll learn a lot today. The plane began to roll. In the cabin, the sound of the engine was quiet, whispers mixed with the sound of tearing newspapers. Margaret sat in row 1A, looking over her shoulder, her eyes unable to hide her discomfort. The flight attendant placed a glass of red wine on her table, and she only nodded faintly. As Sarah passed by, Margaret whispered, I hope this flight doesn't have any noisy children to ruin the peace. Sarah replied softly, still maintaining her professional smile. We always ensure the comfort of all passengers. Ma'am? Margaret pursed her lips, her eyes lingering on the three boys giggling at Noah's antics. A feeling she couldn't quite name rose in her contempt and bitterness. She remembered her son who had run away to live with his black girlfriend in California. The memory made her grip on her drink tighten. She couldn't bear the sight of happy black children. It was like a mirror to her own emptiness. Eli continued to stare out the window, his blue ball in his hand. His mother's words echoed in his head. When you feel scared, remember you can take a deep breath and choose peace. He inhaled deeply, his eyes closing slightly. Outside, the sky stretched endlessly, and he knew his mother was watching. In the back seat, Sarah watched, a sense of unease rising. She saw Margaret mumble softly, her face troubled. Sarah had no idea what was about to happen, but she had a hunch that this flight was not going to be just another ordinary journey. The plane lifted off the runway and into the blue sky. The three boys sat close together, holding hands, their hearts pounding with excitement. Little did they know that in a few hours, in the midst of the white clouds, an event would occur that would forever change their lives and the lives of their strong mother waiting on the ground. That morning, in a luxurious mansion in Buckhead, Atlanta, sunlight filtered through sheer curtains onto the thick carpet in the living room. The sound of an antique clock ticked steadily, as quietly as the breath of a house that rarely heard laughter. Margaret Langston sat at her dressing table, a glass of white wine in her hand, her lips slightly curled. On the table were a series of expensive perfume bottles, each bottle arranged precisely as if competing to show off the owner's wealth. She wore a beige sheepskin coat, and around her neck hung a string of pearls the size of corn kernels, a symbol of the world she believed she belonged to. On the wall hung an old photograph of her and her husband, Richard Langston, a prominent Atlanta financier. His smile seemed still there, but Margaret's eyes were cold when she looked up. He had died 3 years earlier of a heart attack, leaving her with a huge fortune and an unfillable void. But what haunted Margaret more than loneliness was the feeling of being abandoned. After his death, her high-class friends gradually shunned her. They said behind her back that she was too strict, too arrogant, too intolerable. Her only son left her, pursuing what she called a crazy life. He married a black girl and moved to California. From then on, Margaret developed a shield of anger and pride. She told herself that she still had status, that her skin color and wealth were still her ticket to distinction. Every morning, she would get out of bed, wearing that false confidence, and believing that the world still owed her respect. That morning, Margaret decided to fly to Los Angeles to attend an investor gala. She booked first class, of course, and requested that the airline prepare a gluten-free meal. When the driver asked if she wanted to leave early, she just curled her lips and said, "No one dares to fly without waiting for me." In the car. Margaret checked her phone to check the news. An article about the black CEO of Liberty Air appeared on the screen. Dr. Naomi Carter, the woman who changed the face of American aviation. She laughed sarcastically. Yes, by turning the airline into a charity. She thought of the airline's slogan, "Fly with dignity." In her mind, dignity meant power, not equality. When the car stopped in front of the airport, the VIP staff bowed, but their eyes no longer held the respect they once did. She noticed, although she tried to act indifferent, deep inside, Margaret felt a small pang. The days of people opening doors out of respect were over. Now, the people she once called lesser people were sitting in the control room, signing the checks she once controlled, passing through security. She held her head high, her smile cold. A concierge asked softly, "Do you need help with your luggage?" She replied immediately, "If I did, you would know. Now get out of the way." The young concierge nodded, his face slightly sad. Margaret went to the first-class lounge, sat down on a leather chair, and ordered a glass of white wine. Next to her was a young brown-skinned couple talking softly. She glanced over, annoyed by their laughter. "They don't teach manners anymore," she muttered, low enough for only herself to hear. But the couple heard and fell silent. The feeling made her happy. When the loudspeaker announced that Flight 447 was about to depart, Margaret stood up and adjusted her silk scarf. Little did she know that in another corner of the lobby, triplets were waiting for the same flight, and fate had brought them together. She stepped into the first-class aisle, her eyes scanning each person. When she saw 3 black children laughing near the door, her face froze. In that moment, all the memories, the bitterness, the resentment inside her rushed back. The image of her son with his black wife appeared like a knife to her heart. Is the world so messed up now, she thought. Boarding the plane. Margaret chose a window seat. Sarah Vega, the chief flight attendant, came over to greet her. Hello? Mrs. Langston, it's a pleasure to serve you. Would you like anything other than white wine? Margaret replied dryly. A quiet flight. No children. Sarah kept smiling. We'll do our best, ma'am. Margaret sipped her wine, her eyes wandering out the window. The plane began to taxi. She listened to the sound of the engines, a sound that reminded her of her husband. The sound of an airplane is the heartbeat of the modern world, he had said. She had felt proud then. Now the sound only made her feel empty. For a moment, she thought of her son. She had loved him with all her heart, but that love turned to disappointment when he chose a different path. Mother, I just want to live as myself. Those were the last words he said before leaving home. From that day on, Margaret stopped crying, but there was always a hole in her heart. On this flight, she carried her last pride, believing that the world still revolved around people like her. But she did not know that, in just a few hours, that world would collapse before her eyes, and she would see herself in the distorted mirror of wrongdoing. As Sarah walked by, Margaret asked, "Who allowed children to sit in this compartment?" Sarah replied quietly. "All passengers have the same rights. Ma'am, their tickets are valid." Margaret chuckled. "That's ridiculous. Those children don't understand class." Sarah just nodded, not wanting to argue, but her eyes showed her disappointment. She lay back, closed her eyes, and tried to ignore everything. But her husband's words echoed in her head. "The more you isolate yourself, the lonelier you become." She didn't understand it then. Now, in the expensive first-class cabin, surrounded by silence, those words seemed prophetic to her. Margaret opened her eyes and looked around. People around her were busy with phones, laptops, newspapers. No one really cared about anyone else. The luxurious silence she had craved was now a costly isolation. She squeezed her glass and shook her head. The stewardess approached and asked softly, "Would you like anything else?" "More wine," Margaret replied. Her voice was hoarse, whether from fatigue or the emptiness in her heart. It was unclear. When the stewardess left, she sighed, her fingers unconsciously touching the pearl necklace around her neck. It was cold, hard, and heavy, like the years of pride she had carried. Little did Margaret know at that moment that the last moments of peace in her world were slipping away. One small bump, one scream, one slap, everything she believed in, all the pride she had built up over 47 years, would crumble in the sky. The plane was about to take off. Margaret closed her eyes, a smug smile on her lips. She believed that she was at the top of the world, not knowing that soon, when the door of fate opened, she would be the one in free fall. Waiting area D12 was busier than usual that morning. The loudspeaker announcements were steady. The smell of roasted coffee wafted in the air, mixed with the expensive perfume of the first-class passengers scattered around the VIP area. Outside the glass doors, planes rolled down the runway one after another. their silver wings sparkling in the April sun. The three Carter boys sat close together in the row of seats near the boarding door, a small blue suitcase with the Liberty Air logo on it in front of them. Micah rested his tablet on his lap, reviewing the presentation on the renewable energy robot project. Eli sat next to him, still clutching the small ball, his eyes scanning the crowded space, seemingly a little nervous. Noah sat cross-legged, tapping his suitcase while humming a tune he had made up. Passers-by looked at the three boys, many with curious and sympathetic looks. They were incredibly similar, the same light brown skin, the same big round eyes, the same smile that carried a rare innocence. Sarah Vega walked by, a tablet in her hand, checking the passenger list. She stopped when she saw the three boys. "You're the Carters, right? I'm Sarah, your flight attendant." She bent down, smiling softly. "Your mom just called to ask me to pay attention." "She's so proud of you," Micah nodded politely. "Thank you. My mom is always so worried." Sarah laughed, her eyes fond. That's what moms do. A few passengers nearby heard and turned to smile. They had no idea that the mother was the CEO of the airline they were about to board. Only Sarah felt a sudden sense of admiration and curiosity. She had met Naomi Carter a few times in internal training sessions, but had never spoken to her directly. She remembered the look in her eyes, calm, thoughtful, but something that made you feel like you had to adjust your posture when standing in front of her. Across the hall, Margaret Langston had just emerged from the first-class lounge. She held a cup of black coffee, glancing around as if to make sure no one had taken her seat. When her eyes landed on the Carter boys, her brows furrowed. She watched them silently, a vague feeling of unease rising inside her. She wasn't sure what was bothering her, maybe Noah's clear laughter, or the way Micah spoke with too much dignity for a child. She thought, kids these days don't know where they belong. She walked back to the check-in counter, her voice stiff. "Excuse me. I heard there were children assigned to first-class seats on this flight. Have your airline lowered the standards?" The counter staff looked a little surprised, then replied politely, "Ms. Langston, those three little passengers are the children of a VIP guest in the executive program. Their tickets are completely valid." Margaret frowned. "I don't care if they are valid or not. I paid for a quiet space." The staff could only bow their heads. "We are very sorry for the inconvenience, but our regulations do not allow us to discriminate based on age." Margaret stopped talking, just glared coldly, turned around and left. Meanwhile, Sarah turned back to check the boarding list. She saw Margaret approach the row of three boys. Her voice rang out, deliberately louder than usual. "It's rare to see black children sitting in this section." No one spoke, but a few people around glanced at her, embarrassed. Micah raised his head slightly, his eyes meeting Margaret's. "I'm sorry if I'm bothering you. We were just waiting to board." Margaret raised her eyebrows, a sneer on her face. "Well, at least you apologize. Good. Keep it up, because the world out there is impatient." Eli tugged at his hand, his voice trembling. "Micah, don't say anything." He looked down, squeezing the ball. Sarah stepped forward, placing a hand gently on Margaret's shoulder. "Mrs. Langston, I hope you understand that this is a common area. If you need some quiet, I can arrange chairs in a private room." Margaret pulled her shoulder away from her. "I don't need anyone to arrange things for me. I just want people to know my limits." Sarah was silent, her gaze fixed on her, calm but firm. The loudspeaker blared, "First-class passengers on Liberty Air Flight 447 to Los Angeles. Please prepare to board at gate D12." Sarah breathed a sigh of relief that the encounter was over for now. She bent down and said to the 3 boys, "You guys go ahead with me." The 3 boys nodded, and one by one they dragged their suitcases towards the boarding gate. Margaret followed closely behind, her steps heavy, her lips still pressed tightly together. The line stretched, everyone busy with their phones or boarding passes. When it was their turn, the ticket inspector smiled at the 3 boys. "Have a nice trip, boys," Noah replied, his smile as bright as the sun. "Thanks, Uncle. I'll send Mom a picture of the robot when we get there." Margaret heard it, her lips curling slightly. She muttered loud enough for someone nearby to hear robot kids these days are really showing off. Inside the first-class cabin, soft yellow lights filled the space. The leather seats were soft, and the scent of orange blossom oil was light. Sarah guided the 3 boys to seats 2A to 2C, helping them fasten their seat belts. Eli sat between the 2 boys, still looking out the window. Sarah leaned down and whispered, "It's okay. The sky is beautiful. Just take a deep breath." Eli nodded. Margaret followed, glancing around when she saw them sitting in the row behind her. She stopped and said to Sarah, "I don't want to sit near the children." Sarah held back her smile. "Sorry, Mrs. Langston. All the first-class seats are taken today, but I can assure you these 3 boys are very good." Margaret narrowed her eyes. "We'll see if that's true." Sarah left to prepare for takeoff. Margaret sat down in seat 1A, took a deep breath, and tried to quell her discomfort. She told herself she would sleep through the flight, but the small voice behind her was too loud to ignore. Noah whispered, "Micah." "Can I get Mom's book from her bag?" Micah replied softly, quietly, so as not to disturb her. But the rustling was enough to make Margaret open her eyes. She turned back, her gaze cold. "I told you. I need quiet." Micah apologized politely. "Yes, we apologize." Margaret turned away, but her heart was still full of frustration. No one had taught her that sometimes silence comes not from emptiness, but from tolerance. The plane began to taxi down the runway. The sun was already high in the sky. Sarah walked down the aisle, her eyes scanning, checking her seatbelts. She stopped in row 2 and whispered, "Are you okay?" "Kids," Micah smiled. "Yes. Thank you," Margaret heard. Her eyes closed, but her lips pursed slightly. In that moment, Sarah felt a tense atmosphere in the first-class cabin. She didn't know why, but she had a bad feeling. There was something about the woman in the front row that made her uneasy. There were storms that didn't come with a roar, but started with a cold stare. And at the back of the cabin, as the engines roared and lifted the plane off the ground, the 3 children looked at each other, their eyes shining. "We're flying," Noah whispered. Eli smiled weakly. "I think Daddy's watching us from up there." Micah took his hand. "Yeah, and so is Mom, in the front row." Margaret leaned back, her lips still slightly curved. Little did she know that in a few hours, the proud world she had held so tightly to herself would be shattered, not by a powerful enemy, but by the hands of a child she had just despised. The plane leveled off, the morning light streaming through the windows onto the passengers' faces. The air in first class was as soft as classical music, the only sound being the steady rhythm of the engine in the distance. Sarah Vega walked down the aisle, gently adjusting the blankets for the sleeping passengers. When she reached row 2, she paused, looking at the 3 Carter boys sitting up straight, their eyes eagerly looking up at the sky through the small window. She smiled. "Is everything okay, guys?" Micah nodded. "Yes, Sarah. I've never seen a small city like this from above." Sarah leaned down and whispered, That's why I love flying. From up here, everything on the ground seems small, even my worries." Eli listened, still holding the blue balloon in his hand, and asked softly, "Are you scared when you fly?" Sarah thought for a few seconds. "Yes, at first. But then I realized that fear is like clouds, thick, but you can pass through them." Eli smiled. He had no idea how those words would haunt him later. In the front row, Margaret Langston set her glass of red wine on the table, her steely eyes glancing through the mirror. She heard the conversation clearly and felt inexplicably annoyed. She muttered, "Children are noisy." Then she called softly, "Miss Vega." Sarah turned, her smile still on. "Yes, Mrs. Langston. Can you tell those children to be quiet? I don't pay to listen to cheap philosophy." Sarah kept her voice gentle. "I understand, ma'am. I'll give you a gentle reminder." She walked over to the boys' row and bent down. "Kids, try to keep your voices down. Someone needs to rest." Micah nodded, his eyes sad. "Yes, I'm sorry." Sarah put her hand on his shoulder. "It's okay, honey. Just relax. Just keep your voice down." Margaret looked at the scene, and a mixed feeling arose in her heart. Jealousy and annoyance. She thought, "Since when have flight attendants become so close to children?" She closed her eyes, trying to lull herself to sleep. But her mind was still restless. Her son's voice echoed in her head. "Mother, you can't decide who I love." She opened her eyes, picked up her glass of wine, and drank it all, hoping the alcohol would erase her memories. Behind him, Noah whispered to the two brothers, "What do you think Mom is doing?" Micah looked at his watch. "She's probably in a meeting, but she always checks her flights." Eli was silent, still looking at the sky outside. "I'm scared when I'm up high. I keep thinking something's going to fall." Micah took his hand. "It's okay. Mom says everything's safe when you trust the pilots." Sarah walked by, heard, and stopped. "Your mom is amazing." For a moment, the atmosphere was temporarily calm. The engine hummed steadily. Passengers read newspapers. A few people typed on their computers. Yellow lights cast a glow on calm faces. But that peace was as fragile as glass. The slightest crack was enough to shatter it. Margaret opened her bag and took out her phone. She was about to email her assistant, but then she saw an article in an e-magazine pop up. Dr. Naomi Carter, the woman who made Liberty Air America's most humane airline. She curled her lips, her eyes cold. Humane. Or in the name of, she skimmed the introduction, former pilot, mother of triplets, resilient widow, symbol of equality and kindness. Margaret's wine glass shook slightly. 3 boys, triplets. She turned, her eyes landing on the 3 boys sitting in the back seat. A thought crossed her mind. It can't be a coincidence. She looked longer, noticing the similarities in their faces, the confidence, the bright eyes. A pang of jealousy pricked her chest. Also dark-skinned, also self-righteous. Sarah turned and saw Margaret staring at the children, frowning slightly. Her instincts, having served thousands of flights, told her she was in danger, but she kept her composure, walked to the front row, and asked quietly, "Would you like more wine?" Margaret replied sharply, "No, I want peace, and I don't want to be stared at by that crowd." Sarah took a deep breath. "I'll make sure everyone is comfortable, ma'am." She turned away, feeling uneasy. Margaret's words carried more than the disapproving tone of a difficult passenger. They also carried a tinge of spiteful discrimination. Sarah remembered other times she had seen people treated unfairly because of the color of their skin, and a feeling of helplessness welled up in her heart. Behind him, Eli began rummaging through his backpack for books, accidentally dropping a pen on the floor, rolling all the way to Margaret's chair. He whispered, "Sorry, I'll pick it up." He bent down, his small hands almost touching her legs. Margaret flinched and pulled back. She thought he was up to something. "Son, stay away from my stuff." Her voice was sharp. The whole compartment turned to look. Eli was startled. He only had time to whisper, "I was just picking up my pen." Sarah walked quickly over. "What's wrong?" Margaret looked at her, her voice harsh. "He leaned over my chair. I don't know what he was up to. I paid for safety, not fear." Sarah bent down, picked up the small pen, and placed it in Eli's hand. "It's just a pen, Mrs. Langston. It's nothing." Margaret was silent, her lips pressed together. The three boys sat in silence. No one said anything. A heavy feeling spread throughout the cabin. A middle-aged passenger in the row opposite shook his head slightly and whispered, "This is absurd." Sarah looked at her watch. Only 3 hours to Los Angeles. She wished time would pass faster, so this tense atmosphere would end. But fate often does not wait for people to wish. A slight vibration rippled through the plane, and the seatbelt sign came on. Captain Howard Blake's voice came over the loudspeaker. "Please remain seated. We're experiencing some light turbulence." Sarah quickly checked the seats. She bent down and said, "Keep your belts fastened. You'll be fine." Eli nodded, eyes wide. Margaret frowned, her hand clasping her wine glass. "Oh my God, can't we have a smooth flight?" Sarah smiled slightly. "Just a little, ma'am." The plane shook more violently. Margaret's glass tilted, a few drops spilling onto her dress. She placed it on the table in panic, just as the blue ball in Eli's hand rolled to the floor, rolling right towards her feet. Eli bent down reflexively to pick it up. Margaret shouted loudly, her voice sharp as a knife, "Boy, stay away from me." The scream echoed throughout the cabin, startling several passengers. Eli jumped, his face pale. He tried to say, "I was just picking up balls," but Margaret didn't listen. The fear and tension built up and turned into an instinctive action. She stood up, her hand raised, and in a split second, she landed a thunderous slap on the boy's face. The dry slap rang out, piercing the silence. Sarah froze for half a second, then rushed forward, her voice hard. "Mrs. Langston?" You just attacked the young passenger. Margaret hadn't had time to react. Her anger still evident on her face. She spoke through gritted teeth. "I defended myself. I didn't know what he was trying to do." Sarah looked around and saw everyone watching. A male passenger took out his phone to record. "No, ma'am, everyone here saw it." Eli stood still, his hand on his cheek, his eyes full of tears. Micah pulled him close, his arms around him. Noah trembled, not understanding what had just happened. The engine hummed steadily, but inside everyone, the sky felt like it was splitting open. Sarah pressed the emergency button on the control panel. "Cockpit, this is the chief flight attendant. Serious incident in row 2A. Minor passenger assaulted. Ground report." Captain Howard Blake's voice rang out, calm but urgent. "Acknowledged. Maintain scene. We'll handle it." Margaret sank into a chair, her shoulders shaking slightly. She didn't know if it was from fear or from the realization that all eyes were on her. Sarah looked at her, her voice low. "Do you know what you've done?" She didn't answer. Outside, the clouds were drifting slowly. The sky was a deep blue, and somewhere, fate was beginning to turn. The moment Margaret Langston's hand landed on Eli's cheek, The entire first-class cabin turned to stone. The loud slap echoed through the air, shattering the silence. Eli stood still, his eyes wide open, his small face gradually turning red. He didn't understand why the woman did that, only feeling his heart pounding and his throat tightening. Micah immediately pulled his brother back, his eyes filled with anger and fear. Noah also stood up, his mouth trembling. She hit Eli. Saravaga reacted almost instinctively. She rushed between them, her eyes sharp as knives. Mrs. Langston, back off. Her voice was no longer gentle as usual, but hard and powerful. Margaret remained standing, breathing heavily, her face red with tension. I defended myself, she said, her voice still shaking but trying to maintain her dignity. He lunged at me. Didn't you see? Sarah looked her straight in the eyes. I saw it, ma'am. He just bent down to pick up his ball. You slapped a child. Whispers began to spread throughout the cabin. A male passenger in the opposite row pulled out his phone to record, while the middle-aged woman beside him exclaimed, "Oh my God, she just hit a child." Margaret spun around, her voice sharp as a knife. No one has the right to film me. Stop it. But the man kept the camera on, his eyes full of anger. You hit a child, and you think you can get away with it. Sarah motioned for everyone to calm down, then knelt down in front of the three boys. Are you okay? Micah nodded, but his eyes were full of concern as he looked at Eli. The boy was still holding his cheek, tears streaming down his face. Sarah grabbed a tissue and gently wiped it away. It's okay, Eli. I'm here, Eli choked out. I didn't do anything. I was just picking up the ball. Sarah nodded, her voice shaking with suppressed anger. I know. Son, everyone saw. Margaret sat down, her hands shaking. For a brief moment, she seemed to notice something, a crack in her pride. But then her pride rose even stronger. She straightened her hair and said coolly, Don't make too much of it. It was just a slap. The remark drew a gasp from the cabin. A middle-aged black passenger turned to look at her, his voice low and restrained. No slap is too small when it comes from prejudice. Sarah pressed the emergency button, her voice coming over the intercom. Captain Blake, I need you to come to first class immediately. There is a passenger attacking a child. Captain Howard Blake's voice answered a few seconds later. Got it. I'm coming. Eli sat still holding the ball, staring straight ahead. In his mind, he saw that hand, fast, cold, and heavy. A grown-up hand holding something heavier than fear-hate. Micah hugged him tighter. It's okay, little brother, Mama said. When you meet bad people, the best thing you can do is not let them take your courage. Eli nodded weakly, tears still flowing. The cockpit door opened and Captain Howard Blake stepped in, tall and composed, his voice calm but stern. He looked around, his eyes settling on Margaret. What happened? Sarah said quickly. Ms. Langston slapped the young passenger in the face. There were witnesses. Howard turned to Margaret. Ma'am, this is serious. I need you to calm down. Margaret stood up, trying to regain her composure. I told you. It was self-defense. He came at me. Another passenger stood up. I was sitting right here. He just bent down to pick up the ball. No one attacked you. Howard nodded. Thank you, Mrs. Langston. As per protocol, we will take a report and notify the ground. You are to remain seated until landing. Margaret gasped. You can't do that. Do you know who I am? Howard said simply. On an airplane, everyone is the same. The words froze the air. Sarah looked at him, her eyes full of gratitude. A few passengers clapped lightly, a short but resounding applause that echoed in silent agreement. Margaret sat down, her face pale, but her eyes still flashed with hatred. Sarah bent down to reassure the three boys. "We're almost there. Your mother has been notified." Micah looked up, his voice soft but firm. "You know everything." Mom Sarah nodded. "The agency sent a live report. Your mother is on her way to the LAX airport." Eli turned to the window, his voice low and breathless. "I don't want Mom to be sad." Sarah squeezed her small hand. "Mommy won't be sad." "Eli, she's strong. In the front row." Margaret pulled out her phone, but Howard gently stopped her. "Sorry, the signal is limited. Please sit still." She shot him an angry look, but didn't dare argue further. Inside, her anger was turning to fear. She knew that once the plane landed, things would be out of her hands. Sarah returned to the service area, made a glass of orange juice, and brought it to Eli. "Drink this. You'll feel better." He took the glass, his hands still shaking. "Thank you." Micah looked at the waitress, his voice so serious it surprised Sarah. "Sarah, can you hit someone and not get hurt?" Sarah looked at him, her eyes downcast. "No, Micah, no one should do that, especially not to people smaller than you." Howard returned to the cockpit, his voice booming over the plane's loudspeakers. "Ladies and gentlemen, we will be landing in Los Angeles in 2 hours. Please remain calm. The crew will assist you." Sarah could tell he was trying to maintain a calm demeanor, to avoid panicking the other passengers. Margaret sat there, staring straight ahead, her mind blank. For the first time in years, she felt vulnerable. No one was around to protect her reputation. No lawyers, no business cards, no financial handshakes, just judgmental eyes and 3 children. 3 pairs of glassy eyes she couldn't bear. Sarah watched silently. She recognized that there was something more complex about Margaret than blind rage. Perhaps it was fear. Perhaps it was bitterness from years of isolation. But whatever the cause, her actions were inexcusable. Time passed slowly. Eli calmed down, his head resting on Micah's shoulder. Noah told a joke to lighten the mood. Sarah smiled as the laughter faded. She felt relieved. But deep down, she knew this was just the calm before a bigger storm. As the plane began to descend, Sarah received a signal from the ground communication system. The message flashed on the screen. "Dr. Naomi Carter has arrived at LAX. Please remain at the scene until she arrives." Sarah read it, her heart racing. She knew the crucial moment was coming. As for Margaret, when she heard the announcement of the imminent landing, she just let out a small sigh. She told herself, just get off the plane. Everything will be settled. But she did not know that the ground was not a shelter, but a place where the truth awaited. The plane touched down on the runway, a long, grinding sound. There was a moment of silence. Eli looked out the window, the last rays of sunlight streaming in, a warm yellow. "It looks like Mom is out there," he said softly. "Maybe you're right," Sarah said softly. "When the light went out." Sarah stood up and said calmly, "Please remain seated until instructed." Margaret started to stand, but Sarah placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "I advise you to stay. Mrs. Langston, you are about to meet someone you never expected to meet." Margaret looked at her, puzzled. "What did you say?" Sarah replied softly, her voice a little bitter. "The boy's mother." The cabin was dead silent. In the second row, 3 boys held hands, their hearts filled with excitement. The plane door opened, and sunlight flooded in. A tall, composed figure stepped out, dressed in a light gray suit. Her eyes were bright but cold, a look that made the cabin hold its breath. Dr. Naomi Carter had arrived. The light from the plane door flooded in, making everyone squint. No one said a word. All eyes were on the woman who had just boarded. Dr. Naomi Carter appeared with a calm and naturally powerful demeanor, her light gray suit hugging her tall, slender body, the white silk scarf around her neck swaying slightly with each step. She didn't need to say a word. Her presence was enough to slow down the space. Each of her footsteps echoed lightly on the plane floor, mixed with the gasps of the onlookers. Sarah Vega stood up straight, tilted her head slightly, and said, her voice low but clear, "Welcome aboard, Dr. Carter." Naomi nodded slightly, her eyes sweeping over Sarah, then stopping at the three boys sitting close together in the second row. Eli still had red, puffy eyes, his small hands clutching a blue ball. Micah looked up, met his mother's eyes, and said nothing, just nodded slightly. Noah let out a soft breath, his lips trembling as he called softly, "Mom." Naomi walked faster, kneeling in front of her three children, her hand gently stroking Eli's cheek. "Son, are you okay?" Her voice was as gentle as the wind, but her eyes still contained suppressed anger. Eli shook his head slightly, tears welling up. "I'm okay, Mom. It's just—" He choked, unable to finish his sentence. Micah put his hand on his mother's shoulder. "Mom, the flight attendant said you already know everything." Naomi looked at her son, nodding slowly. "Yes, I know. I always know." The atmosphere on the plane was tense. Margaret Langston sat in the front row, her face pale. She had no idea who this woman was, but something about her made her feel overwhelmed. Maybe it was the cold calm, or the power in her eyes that she had never encountered before. Sarah stood nearby, silent, just watching. Naomi stood up and walked over to Margaret. She paused for a second, took a deep breath, and then spoke slowly. "Hello, I'm Naomi Carter. It sounds like you had a rather special flight." Her voice wasn't high, but each word carried weight. Margaret pursed her lips, trying to regain her composure. "I don't know who you are, but I don't have to explain." Naomi looked her straight in the eye, her gaze piercing her pride. "You don't have to. You just slapped my son." A low murmur arose. Some of the passengers held their breaths. Sarah was silent, her heart racing, and Howard Blake emerged from the cockpit, standing behind her like a wall of silence. Margaret blinked, her voice breaking. "Your son, I don't know," Naomi said, her voice steady but her eyes like knives. "I don't know, but you raised your hand anyway. It doesn't matter who, just the color of the skin." "Right." Margaret opened her mouth, but nothing came out. Naomi turned to Eli, her voice softer. "Eli, tell me what happened." The boy raised his head, his voice barely a whisper. "I dropped the ball. I bent down to pick it up and she yelled and hit me. I didn't have time to say anything." Each word he spoke felt like a needle stabbing Naomi. She squeezed her hand, then took a deep breath to calm herself. "Thank you, Eli. I understand." Margaret pushed herself up on her hands, her pride returning. "I told you. I thought it was something. I was just reacting. You can't make me a bad person just because I'm white." Naomi looked at her, her voice low but firm. "No, I didn't make you a bad person. You made that happen by your actions." The first-class cabin remained silent. A young woman passenger held her daughter's hand, watching the scene with emotion. Sarah tried to keep her voice professional. Dr. Carter, we filed a report, and the air marshals are waiting at the airport. Naomi nodded. Thank you. Sarah, I'll take care of them. Margaret laughed awkwardly, her voice cracking. What are you going to do? Call the police. I have a lawyer. Do you know who I am? Naomi tilted her head, her eyes calm. I know. You are the woman who forgot that wealth cannot buy dignity, and I am the mother of the boy you beat. Sarah looked at Naomi, feeling a chill. She realized that the woman's calm was not a sign of weakness, but of absolute control. Behind her soft voice was a brewing storm. Howard stepped forward and whispered, We can ask Mrs. Langston to leave the plane first, so the police can do their work. Naomi nodded, her eyes never leaving Margaret. Go ahead, Captain. Margaret jumped up, trying to struggle. I'm not going anywhere. You have no right to. Another voice rang out, cold and decisive. Mrs. Langston. The voice of a security officer stood at the exit, his eyes stern. Please come with us. No one moved, only the sound of Margaret's high heels clicking against the floor, each step heavier than the last. As she passed Naomi, they looked at each other for a few seconds. Naomi's eyes were no longer angry, but something deeper, like pity. She spoke softly, so that only the two of them could hear. I hope one day you will understand that you have lost something greater than your reputation. Margaret turned away, not answering. The plane door closed behind her, a dry click. The cabin breathed a sigh of relief. Sarah approached, her voice soft. Dr. Carter, I apologize on behalf of the airline. No one deserves that. Naomi shook her head slightly. It's not your fault. It's the fault of a society that has forgotten to teach people to see each other as human beings. Eli remained silent, Micah and Noah sitting close to their mother. Naomi bent down and stroked each of their hair. Kids, I'm sorry I wasn't there, but I promise I won't let it happen again. Noah looked up. I'm not scared of her, Mom, but I'm sad. Naomi smiled softly, her eyes filling with tears. It's okay to be sad, honey. Sadness means your heart still hurts for what's wrong. That's a good thing. Howard returned to the cockpit, his voice echoing throughout the plane. Thank you for keeping quiet. We can now disembark. Passengers began to stand. A middle-aged white man approached Naomi, his voice sincere. Ma'am, I just want to say, I respect the way you handled it. I might have lost my temper. Naomi thanked him, smiling slightly. Thank you, but I was just doing what a mother has to do. Sarah gathered up the remaining glasses and watched Naomi and the three boys leave the cabin. As they stepped out, the light from the runway illuminated the three boys' faces. Eli turned and whispered, Thank you. Sarah. Sarah smiled. Hold the ball well. Eli, it will help you get through today. And tomorrow. Naomi led her children down the stairs. The air marshals were working in the forward area, and Margaret Langston was being led away, her once proud demeanor now lost in her loneliness. Naomi watched, her eyes slightly sad. She didn't hate the woman. She just felt pity, because she knew that sometimes the people who thought themselves the strongest were the weakest in their souls. The three boys squeezed their mother's hand tighter. Eli looked up, his voice low but firm. Mom, can we go home now? Naomi nodded slightly. Yes, son. But before I go, I want to teach you something. She sat down, her eyes gentle. Not all white people are like her. Don't let a wound make you forget kindness. This world is full of good people, and you will make it better. Micah nodded. Noah smiled. Eli looked at the ball in his hand, then whispered, "I understand. Mom, I won't be afraid anymore." Naomi hugged her 3 children. In the pale yellow afternoon sky, that image made Sarah, standing from afar, silent, a quiet ending, but with the weight of tolerance and dignity. Dr. Naomi Carter knows that she is not just a mother, but a reflection of thousands of women who fight every day to protect their children from prejudice. And today, she won, not with power, but with dignity. As Naomi Carter led her 3 sons off the plane, the air on the runway had changed color. The late afternoon sun stretched across the ground, dyeing the planes lined up for takeoff a golden yellow. A gentle breeze blew in from the ocean, carrying the scent of salt and jet fuel, a familiar scent Naomi had known for more than 20 years in the aviation industry. But today, the scent evoked a different feeling in her, a mixture of fatigue, pride, and a deep sadness. Sarah Vega followed a few steps behind, still watching the 3 children. She watched the way they held their mother's hand, both strong and weak, and felt a sting in her nose. She had witnessed many incidents in the air, but none had touched her like this. She understood that what had just happened was more than a minor act of violence. It was evidence of an open social wound. A group of air marshals were waiting ahead. Margaret Langston sat in the isolation area, clutching her bag. Her face was pale, her makeup smudged. An officer approached, his voice professional but not cold. "Ms. Langston, we need you to sign a statement about assaulting a minor passenger on Liberty Air Flight 447. She turned away, speaking softly. "I told you, I acted in self-defense." The officer sighed. "There are more than a dozen witnesses and cabin camera video. We'll turn the file over to the legal department." Margaret smiled wryly, her eyes bewildered. "Don't you know who I am?" he replied softly. "Everyone does now." "Ma'am." Naomi and her children were taken to a private area to take statements. A female officer named Diaz bowed to her. "Dr. Carter, I'm sorry about what happened. We need you to confirm some information." Naomi nodded. "I understand. I just want everything to be done properly." She sat down, pulling out a small chair for Eli to sit next to. He remained silent, his hands clasped tightly around the blue ball. Diaz asked softly, "Does he need a doctor?" Naomi looked at her son and replied, "No, thank you. It was just a slap. The physical pain is not as bad as the symbolic pain." Micah looked up, his eyes bright. "Officer, is she under arrest?" Diaz hesitated, then smiled. "We'll follow the proper procedure." "The important thing is that you and the kids are safe," Noah interjected, his voice innocent. "But what if she apologizes?" Naomi looked at her daughter, her heart softening. "That's a good question. Noah, if she apologizes, I think we should listen." Sarah approached, carrying 2 bottles of water. "I think the girls need some." Naomi took them, smiling. "Thank you. Sarah, you did a good job." Sarah shook her head. "I was just doing the right thing." Then she hesitated, lowering her voice. "You know, when I saw you getting on the plane, I thought, this is what justice looks like." Naomi looked at her, her eyes warm. "Justice isn't revenge. It's shining a light where people don't want to see." In the other room, Margaret peeked out. Her eyes caught Naomi talking to the police. A chill ran down her spine. She no longer saw anger in the woman, but something that bothered her more than anything, kindness. She thought, "She's putting on a show to make me look inferior." But deep inside her, another voice said, Small, weak. What if it's not a pretense? Margaret remembered the little boy's face when she slapped him. His eyes were clear, without hatred, only fear and bewilderment. The sight gave her a headache. In her life, she had hurt many people with her words, but she had never hit anyone. She had thought herself strong because she did not need love. But now, when she saw the woman holding her child in her arms, she suddenly felt strangely small. An officer walked over to Naomi's desk and handed her a form. "Dr. Carter, we're going to ask the city police to take over. Do you want to file a criminal complaint?" Naomi looked at Eli, then back at the officer. "I don't want revenge. I just want the facts on the record." He nodded. "We understand." Sarah watched the scene silently, a sense of awe rising in her. She remembered her early days as a flight attendant, when she had to endure insults because of her Latina heritage. She had fought back and been disciplined for unprofessionalism. Today, watching Naomi handle things with composure, she realized that true strength lies not in winning, but in choosing to win. "In the corner of the room," Micah whispered to his mother. "Mom, if she gets caught—" "Can I forgive her?" Naomi asked, leaning down. "What do you think?" He thought for a moment. I want her to know she's wrong. I don't want anyone to be afraid of someone else just because they're different." Naomi smiled softly, stroking his hair. "That's how strong people think. Micah, I'm proud of you." A Liberty Air employee ran in, holding a phone. "Mrs. Carter, the media knows about this. There are reporters at the airport gate wanting to interview you." Sarah sighed. "The media always comes faster than the wind." Naomi nodded slightly. "They will come, but I won't say anything. This isn't a story to brag about." After a while, Margaret was let out, passing Naomi. The two stood face to face again, this time without an audience. Margaret looked at Naomi, trying to open her mouth, but her words were stuck. Naomi spoke softly first. "Mrs. Langston, I don't hate you. I just hope you see things you've never seen." Margaret smiled wryly. "I don't need anyone to teach me how to live." Naomi nodded slightly. "Maybe not, but I hope you find your humanity again." She turned away, leading her 3 children to the escalator leading to the arrivals hall. Margaret stood there, watching that back as it walked away, her heart filled with an indescribable emotion. For the first time in years, she felt ashamed, not because she had been caught, but because she saw herself through a child's eyes. As Naomi and her children stepped out into the foyer, the sunset bathed them in soft, gentle light. Reporters were waiting, lights flashing, microphones reaching out. One asked, "Dr. Carter, do you have anything to say about what just happened?" Naomi paused, her eyes on the camera, her voice calm. "I don't want to make a headline out of my children's pain. I just want to say that sometimes lessons in humanity don't come from books, but from mistakes. Hopefully, we all learned something today." The crowd fell silent. For a moment, Sarah stood back, feeling her heart warm. She knew this moment would be remembered for years to come, not as a scene of violence, but as a reminder of dignity. Naomi leaned down and whispered to her children, "Come on, I think this is a long day." The 3 boys laughed together, their laughter as light as the late afternoon breeze. They stepped outside, where the golden sunlight cast 3 long shadows beside their mother's figure. In the distance, in the police car, Margaret Langston turned to look out the window. Her eyes lingered on the image. 4 people walking through the sunset. For the first time in her life, she felt truly alone. A tear fell down her cheek, and she didn't know if it was from fear, regret, or the realization she had spent her whole life trying to avoid no one is superior to another because of the color of their skin. The sun is setting, the day is over, but this story is just beginning. A story about looking back at ourselves, about loving in a world that is still full of cracks. The news spread like a hot wind in the middle of a Los Angeles summer, less than 12 hours after Liberty Air Flight 447 landed. The phrase, "white woman slaps black triplets," was all over social media. The blurry image taken by the passenger's phone was shared millions of times, accompanied by an angry caption. In the video, a slap was clearly heard, followed by Eli's muffled sobs. No one knew who the mother was at the end of the video. Only the figure of a woman in a bright suit stepped forward amid the silence, her eyes like cold fire. The next morning, the press scrambled to report the story. Some headlines were shocking, others were analytical. All asked the question, who is the woman in the video? When it was confirmed that it was Dr. Naomi Carter, CEO of Liberty Air, the public was in an uproar. A black female executive running a major airline confronting a wealthy white woman on her own plane. It was a scenario the press could not ignore. Naomi sat in her office at Liberty Air headquarters, the morning light streaming through the large glass windows onto her face. Before her were piles of unread emails, press releases awaiting signature, and a constantly ringing phone. She stared silently at the photo of her 3 children on her desk, a photo taken last summer when they had a picnic in Yosemite. Eli was smiling brightly in the photo, his eyes sparkling in the sunlight. She touched the glass frame and sighed. Sarah Vega walked in, carrying 2 cups of hot coffee. "Good morning, Dr. Carter. The press is still waiting for an official response." Naomi looked up, her voice calm but a little tired. "I know. Thank you." "Sarah, did you sleep well?" Sarah chuckled. "Not really. I've been thinking about yesterday. It's strange. I feel angry and relieved at the same time." Naomi smiled. "Because you still feel both. Angry to remember and relieved to forgive." The door opened, and Marcus Hill, Liberty Air's communications director, walked in hurriedly, holding a stack of documents. "Naomi, I just had a meeting with the communications team. They advised you to speak up as soon as possible. Public opinion is divided. One side strongly supports you. The other believes the airline is using the incident to promote its image." Naomi closed her eyes for a few seconds, then spoke slowly. "We don't speak for the brand. We speak for the truth." Marcus hesitated. "So what are you going to tell the public?" Naomi said, looking out the window. "That we live in a society where the slightest prejudice can terrify a child, and that I won't let that happen on any Liberty Air flight." Across town, Margaret Langston sat in her luxury apartment, the morning news playing on the television. A picture of Naomi appeared, followed by the words "Liberty Air CEO, mother of Flight 447 hijacker." Margaret quietly turned off the sound. She had not left the house since that day. The calls from friends had dwindled, then disappeared. Some society magazines had removed her picture from their articles, and clubs that had invited her to join had stopped sending letters. She looked out the window. Los Angeles was still as noisy as ever, but inside her, all the sounds had turned off. The police had called her in to file the papers. Her lawyer, Mr. Fletcher, tried to reassure her. "We can negotiate. If you apologize publicly, I think things will calm down." Margaret laughed dryly. "Sorry. They want me to kneel before the cameras," Fletcher said slowly. "Sometimes bowing your head isn't a sign of weakness. It's a sign of wanting to get up again." She fell silent, her eyes staring into the distance. His words reminded her of Naomi's gaze at the airport, inexplicably calm, as if she had won without even winning. That afternoon, Naomi held a press conference. Hundreds of reporters gathered. Flashbulbs flashing, she stepped onto the podium. No papers, no escort. She carried only a small photo, her 3 children. The murmurs died down as she began to speak. "I am not here as a CEO, but as a mother. One of my children was slapped that day because they had skin of a color they did not choose. I am not telling this to accuse anyone, but to make us face the truth. We are not truly equal when a child can be suspected because of the way they look." Her voice was even, clear, and unshaken. "But I do not hold grudges. I believe that justice is not born of revenge, but of understanding. I hope the woman involved will find peace in her heart, because only then can we truly move forward." The conference room fell silent. A young reporter stood up and asked, "Are you afraid that the way you forgive will make others think this is a small matter?" Naomi looked at him, her eyes soft but firm. "No. Forgiveness does not mean forgetting. Forgiveness is how we prevent wounds from becoming weapons." The press conference ended with a flood of praise from the media. Major newspapers such as the Washington Post and the New York Times called Naomi's speech one of the most powerful humanitarian messages of the year. Public opinion began to shift. Anti-racism organizations voiced their support for her. People shared pictures of the 3 boys with the hashtag #WeStand with the Carter Triplets. That evening, when Naomi got home, the 3 boys were waiting in the living room. Noah ran to hug his mother. "Mom, I saw you on TV. You said it so well." Micah smiled. "My friends at school say my mom is a hero." Naomi sat down and pulled them into her arms. "Mom is not a hero. She is just a mother who wants her children to be treated fairly." Eli looked up, his voice soft. "Mom, I am not scared anymore." Naomi stroked her son's hair and smiled. "That is what I want most." Meanwhile, Margaret played the press conference video again. She watched the part where Naomi talked about forgiveness, her hands shaking slightly. An uncomfortable feeling rose in her chest, not from anger, but from shame. She stood up, walked to the mirror, and looked at herself. Her face was the same, perfectly made up, her blonde hair curled, but the eyes in the mirror seemed to belong to someone else. Empty, lost. She thought to herself, maybe it had been a long time since she had truly looked at herself. The next day, she wrote a handwritten letter, nearly 2 pages long, to Liberty Air. In it, she admitted her mistake and apologized to the 3 children and their mother. She wrote, "No one is born with prejudice. We just learn fear wrongly. That day, I lost myself for a moment, and thanks to that woman, I learned how to be human again." When Naomi received the letter, she read it slowly. There were no tears, just a sigh. She placed the letter on the table and looked out the window, where her 3 children were playing in the garden. It was a peaceful afternoon. She knew that wounds take time to heal, but at least today someone had taken the first step. Sarah called, her voice cheerful. "Mrs. Carter, I just saw that Mrs." Langston made a public apology. "The world is strange, isn't it?" Naomi laughed. "The world isn't strange, Sarah. It's just learning to love more slowly than we think." Across the ocean, a wave of emotions spread, from mothers, from those who had been hurt, to those who had been silent in the face of injustice. The story of the slap on the flight was no longer just a sensational story. It became a mirror for people to ask, what would we do if we were standing there? The morning in Los Angeles began with the gentle clanging of wind chimes on Naomi Carter's balcony. Sunlight filtered through the trees and onto the small wooden table where the three boys sat eating breakfast. Micah was reading an article on his tablet, his eyes sparkling when he saw his mother's picture on the front page of a major newspaper. Eli quietly buttered a slice of bread, while Noah giggled as he ate at a meme video about the world's coolest CEO. Naomi emerged from the kitchen, a pot of coffee in her hand, the light aroma filling the room. She looked at her children, a sense of peace rising in her heart that she had not felt in a long time. Micah looked up, his voice full of pride. "Mom, they write about you everywhere. They say you're a symbol of courage." Naomi smiled, putting a hand on her shoulder. "I don't care what they call me, just that you understand why I did it," Eli asked softly, his voice still hesitant. For justice, Naomi nodded. "Part of it, but more of it is for kindness. If people were only afraid of each other, the world would never get better." Noah interrupted, his eyes sparkling. "I think you're a superhero." That made Naomi laugh. The first time in days that it sounded natural. While the boys were at school, Naomi sat at the kitchen table, looking out onto the porch. In that quiet moment, she let her mind drift. Memories flooded back her teenage years in Atlanta, the times she was called names that still hurt, the years she worked twice as hard for recognition. She remembered what her father had said, "Naomi, people can take away your opportunities, but don't let them take away your dignity." Today, she understood more than ever what that meant. The phone rang. It was Marcus Hill. "Naomi, you have several exclusive interview requests, both from CNN and Oprah Daily. They said you could use this story as an inspiration." Naomi let out a small breath. "Thank you, Marcus, but I don't want to make my son's heartbreaking story into a symbol. If I have anything to say, I'll say it when the time is right." Marcus laughed. "I figured you would, but you know, I think what you're doing is more powerful than a media campaign." Meanwhile, across town, Margaret Langston sat in Fletcher's law office. She was dressed more simply than usual. Her makeup faded. Fletcher placed a newspaper in front of her with Naomi's picture on the cover. The headline, "The Woman Who Chose Forgiveness." He spoke softly. "You see, the whole country is talking about Mrs. Carter. Instead of reacting, she chose to be quiet and kind. That's why people respect her." Margaret looked at the newspaper for a long time. "Do you think if I said I was sorry, people would forgive me?" Fletcher shrugged. "No one knows. But forgiveness begins with you forgiving yourself." She leaned back in her chair, staring up at the ceiling. The words haunted her. Forgiving herself, it sounded easy. But for her, the hardest thing was to face the truth that she was wrong. All her life, she had been taught that only the weak admit their mistakes. Now, with her reputation ruined, she understood that sometimes being strong meant admitting that she had hurt others. That afternoon, Naomi drove to school to pick up her children. The school gate was bustling with children's laughter. When Eli saw his mother, he ran over and hugged her tightly. "Mom, today the teacher let me tell a story in class. I told her about that flight." Naomi paused. "What did the teacher say?" Eli smiled brightly. "She said your mother is the one who teaches everyone how to love properly." Naomi's heart suddenly tightened, and she hugged her son tighter. She understood that no matter what the world said, the most important thing was how these children saw their mother. On the way home, the three of them competed to tell stories about school. Micah talked about a classmate who wanted to do a small project on social justice. Noah told of a painting he had made called Light in the Sky, inspired by his mother. Naomi listened as she drove, her heart filled with emotion. She suddenly thought that perhaps, if properly healed, trauma could become a light for others. When she got home, she found an envelope, handwritten in the corner, from Margaret Langston. Naomi opened it, and inside was a photo of the 3 boys on the plane that day, probably taken by a passenger, and a short letter. The first line read, "I don't know how to fix this, but I know that silence will make it worse." The letter was longer than the first one she had ever sent. Margaret told of her childhood indoctrination into racism, of how she grew up fearing being surpassed, and of that slap, not just to the boy, but to the weakest part of herself. At the end, she wrote, "If you'll let me, I'd like to meet you in person to apologize." Naomi put the letter down on the table and looked out the window at the orange sky. She was silent for a long time. Her mind and her emotions were fighting. Part of her wanted to close this, and the other part wanted to believe that people could change. Finally, she picked up the phone and called Marcus. "Marcus, arrange a private meeting for me. No press, no cameras. I want to see Mrs. Langston." 2 days later, they met in a small cafe in Santa Monica. No one recognized the 2 women. One a national disgrace, the other a symbol. Margaret walked in, hunched over, her eyes dark. Naomi stood up and held out her hand. "Thank you for coming." Margaret took the hand, shaking slightly. "Thank you for meeting me." They sat down and ordered 2 cups of tea. After a few minutes of silence, Margaret began to speak, her voice hoarse. "I don't know how to say it. I've lived my whole life in fear, but I've hidden it with pride. When I saw your children, I didn't see them. I saw myself weak, alone, and afraid of being forgotten. And I did the most terrible thing." Naomi didn't interrupt, just listened. She looked into the woman's eyes and saw genuine remorse. When Margaret finished, Naomi softly replied, "I believe in second chances, not for others, but for myself. I forgive you, not because you deserve it, but because I want my children to see that kindness is real." Margaret bowed her head, clasping her hands together. "Thank you. I don't know what I can do to fix it, but I'll try. I've contacted an educational organization to sponsor a racial awareness program for children. I'd like to start there." Naomi smiled. "That's a good start. And if you need help, I'll help." The meeting ended when it was dark. The 2 women left the bar, going in different directions, but perhaps both carrying a part of the peace they had never known before. Naomi returned home to find her 3 children waiting. Eli ran out, shouting, "Mom, we're watching a movie. Let's all watch it together." Naomi sat down, looking at the 3 smiling faces. She knew the wounds could take time to heal, but the important thing was that today, they had been named. That night, after her 3 children had fallen asleep, Naomi opened her notebook and wrote her first line in days. "True strength lies not in winning or losing, but in who you choose to be when it's all over." She put down her pen, closed the notebook, and looked out at the night sky, where the stars were twinkling like tiny shards of light connecting broken hearts. A spring rain fell lightly on Los Angeles, pattering softly on the roof. Naomi Carter sat in front of the window in the warm, bright room, holding a steaming cup of tea. Droplets slid down the glass, reflecting the yellow light from the living room where 3 boys were playing with blocks. She looked at them, a smile flickering and fading. Perhaps, finally, Everything was over, but her heart still felt a vague emptiness. Forgiveness is never the end. It is only the beginning of a new journey, a journey of healing. The phone rang, Sarah Vega's name flashing on the screen. Naomi picked it up, her voice warm but filled with emotion. "Dr. Carter, I just wanted to say, I just submitted my application to law school today. You'll be happy." Naomi smiled. "I'm so happy. Sarah, you'll be a good lawyer because you have the heart of a listener." Sarah chuckled. "Thanks to you. After that, I realized that justice isn't just in the courtroom. It's in how we treat each other." Naomi nodded, her eyes looking far away. "Thank you, Sarah. I think you understand what many people take a lifetime to understand." After the call, Naomi looked at her watch. It was late, but she still didn't want to go to sleep. The image of Margaret Langston appeared in her mind. The meeting the day before, though brief, left her with a strange feeling. She was no longer angry, nor exactly pitying, but rather a kind sadness for a woman who had lost her way. Naomi turned on her computer, intending to finish a few emails, when she saw a new message in her inbox from Margaret Langston. "Thank you for seeing me." She opened the message. Only a few short lines. "I don't know if the world will forgive me, but at least today I know I was seen. Thank you for not turning away." Naomi leaned her head back in her chair. Her eyes closed. She felt more peaceful than ever. The next day, the media continued to cover the story. It was no longer a scandal, but a series of articles analyzing the change in social awareness. Schools began holding small seminars on racism, where adults and children discussed it together. A TV station invited Naomi to participate in a special program on forgiveness, but she declined. She wanted to let the story spread without the added spotlight. That afternoon, while taking her child to the park, Naomi noticed a few people who recognized her. A young Asian woman approached, holding her little girl by the hand. "Excuse me, are you Dr. Carter? I just wanted to thank you. My child was teased at school because of her appearance. I used your story to teach her that gentleness can be powerful." Naomi gently took her hand, smiling softly. "Thank you. Your child will be the reason this world is a better place." Eli, Micah, and Noah chased each other around the lawn, their laughter ringing in the cool air. She looked at them, remembering the sleepless nights, the tense meetings, the times when she thought she wasn't strong enough to be a mother and a leader at the same time. But then, every difficult moment had led to this moment, the moment when she saw her children happy, carefree, and fearless. As they left the park, a light rain fell from the sky. Noah held up his hands to catch the water, laughing. "Mommy? The rain makes me happy," Naomi replied warmly. "The rain is the sky's way of washing away the old things." "Son," Micah asked, "can people be washed away too?" Naomi bent down and gently touched his cheek. "Yes, if they really want to." That evening, Naomi sat in her office. On her desk was a large envelope with the logo of Children for Equality on it. Her assistant had included a note. "They want you to head up a new education program for children." She read the proposal, feeling a surge of emotion. It would be called the Sky Project, inspired by the story of the Triplets. The goal was to create free classes that taught children to respect differences. Naomi touched the bold lettering, "Because no child is born hating." She smiled. Maybe that's why it happened. A few days later, she met Marcus Hill in his office. He held a folder and spoke enthusiastically. "Naomi, if you agree to join the Sky Project, we can raise funding from many other companies. You will be the head of the initiative." Naomi looked at him, her voice calm. I don't want to be the main face. Marcus, I want my children to grow up seeing that change doesn't come from one person, but from all of us. Marcus nodded. You always know how to make people see beyond fame. Naomi smiled slightly. Fame is only worth it when it is used to lift others up. Late in the afternoon, Sarah Vega came to Naomi's office. She brought a small gift, a framed photo of Naomi at the airport, holding her 3 children. I printed this for you. It reminds me that sometimes, in the most terrible moments, you find beauty in the human heart. Naomi took it, her eyes shining with gratitude. Thank you, Sarah. I think you found it too. In another corner of the city, Margaret Langston began a new life. She sold her old house and moved to a small coastal town. She spent her time volunteering for a community organization, helping immigrant children learn English. One afternoon, while teaching a little girl how to write, the girl asked her, Teacher, why are you teaching us for free? Margaret paused, looking out the window at the setting sun. Because I forgot how to be a human being. And now I'm learning again. A few weeks later, she sent Naomi a postcard. It showed a picture of the beach, the sun blazing in the distance. The neat handwriting read, Thank you for giving me a chance to start over. If you ever come to Santa Barbara, I'd like to buy you coffee. Naomi read the letter, smiling slightly. She knew she would come, not because she needed to say more, but because she believed that every journey of forgiveness needed to be completed. That night, as Los Angeles was drenched in rain, Naomi opened the window. The scent of damp earth filled the air. She whispered softly, as if talking to herself, Forgiveness is the only way to continue living fully. Outside in the living room, the laughter of 3 children rang out, calling their mother to come out and watch the new movie. She turned off the lights and stepped outside, the light from the screen reflecting on the faces of the 4 of them. Outside, the rain was still falling, but in that small house, all the wounds had stopped aching. The next morning, Los Angeles woke up after a long rainy night. The air was fresher. The streets reflected the morning sunlight as if they had just been polished. Naomi Carter woke up earlier than usual. She passed by her 3 children's room, smiling slightly when she saw them still curled up in their blankets, their faces peaceful. She made a cup of coffee and sat on the porch, watching the morning dew gradually disappear on the rose bushes she planted with her 3 children. There are days when peace comes so easily. No need for anything big. Just a moment to breathe. To see the people you love still sleeping peacefully. The phone rang softly. It was Marcus Hill. Naomi, good news. The Sky Project has been approved for funding. The entire State Board of Education is on board. Naomi set down her coffee cup, her eyes lighting up. That's great. Marcus, this is where my kids and other kids can learn to love. Marcus smiled on the other end of the line. You know, sometimes I think you're rewriting the concept of leadership, not with power, but with compassion. Naomi was silent for a few seconds, then answered softly, Compassion is the only thing that makes power meaningful. Meanwhile, in Santa Barbara, Margaret Langston opened the door of her beach house. She put on a light coat and walked along the damp sand. The steady sound of the waves mingled with the calls of seagulls. She brought an old notebook with her, one she hadn't written in for years. Today, she opened it and began to write the first lines I used to believe that the world was divided into 2, the strong and the weak. Now I understand. There are only 2 kinds of people, those who know how to love and those who are learning to love. Her pen trembled slightly, but her heart felt strangely peaceful. That afternoon, Naomi went to Liberty Air for the Sky Project kickoff meeting. The meeting room was large, but the atmosphere was cozy. Sarah Vega was there, now wearing a law student jacket, her eyes shining. When Naomi walked in, the whole room stood up to greet her. Marcus presented the project outline experiential classes, community activities, and especially Day Without Prejudice, a day when children from all regions and all skin colors were invited to participate in common activities. Naomi listened, her heart filled with emotion. When Marcus finished, she stood up, her voice soft but resonant. Sky Project is not just a project of Liberty Air. It is a commitment that we will not let children grow up in fear. From today, we fly for that. The room applauded. Sarah looked at Naomi, her eyes filled with pride. After the meeting, she approached, smiling broadly. "Miss Carter, I want to say thank you. Without you, I would never have believed that kindness can make a real difference." Naomi took her hand. "Sarah, you do it better than I can. Everyone can be a light, no matter how small." The first Sky Project launch day took place in early May. The spacious campus of a Liberty Air-sponsored school was awash with color. Children laughed, played games, drew pictures, and told stories about things they were proud of. Eli, Micah, and Noah were there too. The 3 boys and their friends set up a small booth with a sign scrawled on it. "We are different, but we share the same sky." Naomi watched them from afar, tears falling silently. She knew that sometimes miracles are not about big things, but about small hearts that dare to love despite being hurt. During the event, Naomi received a text message from an unknown number. "I'm outside the gate. Can I come in?" She looked at the text and let out a small breath. Margaret Langston. She walked out and saw the woman standing there in a simple beige dress, her hair tied back, holding a small basket of flowers. When she saw Naomi, she smiled slightly. "I came to bring some flowers for the program. I thought, if I could contribute a little, I would like to." Naomi nodded. "Thank you, Margaret. I'm so glad you came." Margaret walked Naomi into the courtyard. She stopped in front of the 3 boys' booth. Eli looked up, his eyes unfamiliar and then recognizing. No longer afraid, only surprised. Margaret leaned down, her voice soft. "Hello, I'm the one who made you sad. I'm sorry. Eli." The boy looked at her for a few seconds, then nodded. "Are you truly sorry?" Margaret smiled, her eyes shining with sincerity. "I think so. And I try every day." Eli chuckled. "Then I forgive you." Naomi watched the scene, her heart sinking. She had not expected that moment of confrontation to happen so naturally and peacefully. Margaret stood up and turned to Naomi. "Your children have beautiful hearts, just like their mother," Naomi replied softly. "Thank you. But perhaps your actions today have taught them something more about forgiveness." They walked through the grounds. Children were running and playing. Laughter was everywhere. Margaret stopped, her eyes fixed on the large board hanging in the middle of the yard, where the slogan, "Sky Project, we all fly under one sky," was written in many languages. She gasped. "It's beautiful. Maybe if I had seen this earlier, my life would have been different," Naomi said softly. "It's never too late to start over." The afternoon was fading, the golden sunlight covering the schoolyard. Naomi and Margaret stood side by side, watching the children play. 2 women from 2 different worlds, now sharing a silent but meaningful moment. Marcus approached, smiling. "You know, I don't think Liberty Air needs any more advertising today. The story has already spread far and wide. Naomi laughed. I hope it flies far, but not for us. But for these children. Margaret looked at her, nodding slightly. I hope so too. As the sun set, the sky turned orange and purple. The three boys ran to hug their mother, their laughter echoing in the wind. Margaret stood watching, then quietly turned away, walking out the gate, but her heart was no longer as heavy as before. Naomi watched, smiling slightly. She knew a new chapter was opening, not just for Margaret, but for herself as well. That evening, when she returned home, Naomi sat by the window, looking out at the starry sky. Sarah texted, "Sky project is a success. People are talking about it everywhere." Naomi replied, "It's not because of me, it's because of all of us." She closed her phone and closed her eyes. Outside, the wind blew gently through the trees, the smell of damp earth and jasmine mixed together. She clearly felt that there were storms that passed not to leave behind destruction, but to teach people to appreciate the peace that followed. The three children ran out and hugged their mother from behind. Micah whispered, "Mommy, the sky is beautiful today." Naomi nodded, her voice blending with the night. "It's beautiful because it reflects pure hearts." She kissed each child on the forehead, her eyes sparkling. "Remember, children, no matter how the world changes, the only thing that will make you fly higher than others is not wings, but kindness." A month after Sky Project launched, Liberty Air offices were filled with new life. Posters bearing the slogan, "We all fly under one sky," were displayed at major airports across the country. Newspapers called it the most humane initiative in the aviation industry in a decade. Naomi Carter walked through the main lobby, her eyes sparkling as she saw employees signing the Equality Pledge wall. She knew that sometimes change comes not from policy, but from a belief planted in people's hearts. Sarah Vega appeared from down the hall, holding a folder. "Dr. Carter, there's a conference call with the Department of Education today about expanding Sky Project to public schools." Naomi smiled and nodded. "Thank you." "Sarah, you're doing better than I thought." Sarah laughed. "I'm just following your light," Naomi replied softly, her voice as light as a breath. "Light doesn't belong to anyone. Sarah, it only spreads when someone is willing to share it." The meeting went smoothly. The officials were impressed with the project's early results. One of them said, "What you do is not just education, but healing." Naomi thanked him, but she knew in her heart that she was also being healed. After the meeting, she received an email from Margaret Langston. The subject line was simply, "I want you to see this." Inside was a video of a small classroom in Santa Barbara where Margaret was telling stories to children. "I used to think I understood everything," she said. "Now I'm learning all over again. Learning to listen. Learning to love." The children sat around, their eyes focused. Naomi watched the video 3 times, overwhelmed with emotion. She smiled and whispered, "Finally, she found peace." That afternoon, Naomi took the 3 boys to the airport. Today, Liberty Air organized a special flight for children from many different regions, the iconic flight called Flight of Hope. More than 100 children would experience free flying, meet the pilots, staff, and hear stories about dreams. When they reached the gate, Eli held his mother's hand tightly. "Mom, I'm a little scared. I haven't forgotten the last flight." Naomi bent down and hugged her son. "You don't need to forget. Just know that today, we fly for a different reason. We fly to love and overcome fear." Eli nodded slightly, his eyes shining. The atmosphere on the plane was bustling. Sarah Vega was the flight attendant, her smile always bright as she guided the children. Naomi sat in the back row, quietly observing. Laughter filled the cabin, small hands clasped together. As the plane began to take off, Micah leaned over and whispered in her mother's ear, "Mom, I think everyone has their own sky." Naomi smiled, her eyes sparkling. "Yes, but the wonderful thing is that all those skies meet in one place, where the heart knows how to understand." As the plane leveled out, Sarah invited Naomi to say a few words. She stood, her deep voice booming through the speakers. "Today, we fly not just to get somewhere, but to remember that every child in the world has the right to fly. No one is born to be doubted or afraid. Whenever we see someone different, remember, they see us too, under the same sky." The cabin fell silent. Then the applause continued. Eli turned to look at his mother, his face radiant. In that moment, Naomi saw clearly. All the hurt had melted away. The invisible scars were healed not by apologies, but by human kindness. As the plane landed, a light rain fell on the tarmac, creating a magical scene. Sarah walked over and whispered, "Mrs. Carter, there is a special guest waiting for you in the lobby." Naomi went to the door and saw Margaret standing there, holding a bouquet of sunflowers. She smiled. "I came not to apologize any more, but to congratulate you. You have done something I never thought possible." Naomi took the flowers, her voice calm. "No, we did it. Without you, there would be no lesson to tell." Margaret looked at the 3 children running around her eyes warming. "I met them at the Sky Project. They are wonderful." Naomi nodded. "They teach me patience and tolerance every day. Maybe I'm learning all over again, like you." The 2 women looked at each other, smiling genuinely. There were no boundaries, only the understanding of those who had fallen and dared to get back up. In the evening, Naomi returned home. The sky was clear. The night sky was clear. The moonlight covered the small lake in the yard. She sat on a wooden chair. The 3 boys clung to her, telling stories about the flight. Noah laughed loudly. "I saw a friend who had never flown before. When the plane took off, he cried with joy." Eli said softly, "I know how it feels. I cried back then, too, but because I was scared. Now I cry because I am happy." Naomi hugged all 3 of them, her voice warm. "You see, if you don't let fear hold you back, you will see how big the world is." After the children were asleep, Naomi went into her study and opened her notebook. The first page contained a sentence she had written the night before. "True strength lies not in winning or losing, but in who you choose to be when it's all over." She turned the page and continued, "And perhaps true healing comes not when we forget, but when we dare to remember without pain." She closed the book and looked out the window where the moonlight reflected on the water. She suddenly heard small footsteps. Eli stood at the door, his voice sleepy. "Mom, aren't you asleep yet?" Naomi turned around and smiled. "I'm just writing a few lines. Go back to sleep." Eli walked over and leaned his head on his mother's shoulder. "I just wanted to say thank you for not giving up. If you hadn't come that day, I would still be afraid to fly." Naomi hugged her son tightly. "Thank you for believing in me. And remember, never be afraid to love." The boy smiled and ran back to his room. Naomi watched him, her heart as light as the wind. She knew a new chapter of her life was opening. No more resentment, no more prejudice, only love and understanding. She closed her eyes, listening to the sounds of the night outside, the sound of insects mixed with the steady breathing of the cozy house. In Santa Barbara. Margaret also sat by the window, looking out at the ocean. She wrote a letter to Naomi. I thought about what you said, about second chances. It turns out that sometimes those chances don't come from others, but from yourself, when you dare to let go of your shame. Thank you for teaching me that kindness can soar higher than justice. Meanwhile, at the Liberty Air office, a new poster was being printed for the summer campaign, a picture of a blue sky, 3 children holding hands, and the text below, when we fly together, the world heals. Naomi had not seen the poster yet, but she seemed to sense it. The world, though still scarred, was slowly healing with hearts that listened. One summer morning, the sunlight poured through Naomi Carter's window, soft and clear. The sound of waves from the nearby beach drifted in, mingling with the laughter of 3 boys playing in the yard. The air in the house was warm and gentle, like the breath of a new day. Naomi placed a vase of sunflowers on the table, the flower that she had come to love since meeting Margaret again. Every morning, looking at that bright yellow color, she felt more confident. Today was a special day. Liberty Air held its first Sky Project wrap-up ceremony, attended by hundreds of children and their parents. The event was broadcast live nationwide. On the table, her dark blue suit was neatly pressed, but Naomi still felt nervous, as if it was her first time standing in public. She wasn't afraid of the flashbulbs, but afraid that she wouldn't be able to fully convey what she wanted to say, that the world is only truly beautiful when people look at each other with their hearts. As the car pulled away from the house, the 3 boys in the back chattered. Noah talked about his group presentation at school, where he had been chosen to be the host. Micah talked about his idea for an app to help students share stories of kindness. Eli just sat there, looking out the window, then said softly, "Mommy, I want to see Margaret again." Naomi turned slightly, her eyes soft. "Do you miss her?" Eli nodded. "I don't know why, but I think she's still sad. I want her to know I'm okay." Naomi smiled softly, placing her hand on his. "She'll know, Eli, because your smile is the best answer." The ceremony was held in Liberty Air's grand ballroom. When Naomi stepped onto the stage, the room fell silent. She looked around, seeing the faces of children, parents, airline employees, and even those who had once doubted that this could work. The lights gently illuminated her face, and when she began to speak, her voice was warm and firm. When we started Sky Project, all I wanted was to create a place where children could learn to see each other without regard for the color of their skin or the accent of their voice. But today, as I look around this room, I realize that not only are children learning, but adults are also learning to be human again. Applause broke out. Naomi continued, "Every journey of change begins with a question. Can I be better than I was yesterday? If the answer is yes, then we have won, not over others, but over our own fear." In the 3rd row, Eli looked at his mother, his eyes sparkling. She continued, "I was afraid. My children were afraid. But today, we are no longer afraid, because we chose love." When she finished, Naomi paused for a few seconds before leaving the stage. The audience stood up. Applause was long and loud. Marcus stepped forward, smiling brightly. "Dr. Carter, you just made me believe that flights have more than just a destination. They have a purpose," Naomi replied softly. "If one child feels more loved than yesterday, then it was the most successful flight of my life." While Naomi was chatting with the guests, a staff member came up and whispered something in her ear. Naomi turned around, her eyes slightly surprised. Margaret Langston is here. The staff member nodded. She sat in the back row, said she didn't want to be disturbed. Naomi looked towards the back of the auditorium, where the woman was sitting quietly, a bouquet of sunflowers in her hand. She stepped down and walked between the rows of seats. When she arrived, Margaret stood up. The two looked at each other, saying nothing for a few seconds. Then Naomi smiled and opened her arms. Margaret stepped forward and hugged her tightly. "Thank you for coming," Naomi said softly. Margaret replied, her voice trembling slightly. "I couldn't help it. I wanted to see the magic you created, and I wanted to thank little Eli for teaching me that forgiveness can save a life." Naomi took her hand. "No, you saved the good in you. I just helped you see it." The ceremony ended in laughter and golden lights. As everyone left, Margaret bowed to the three children. Noah said jokingly, "You know, you were the first person my mother forgave before I even knew what forgiveness was." Margaret laughed, tears rolling down her cheeks, and because of that, I learned what it meant to start over. Eli stepped forward and handed her a small leather bracelet. "I made it for you, so that when you wear it, you'll remember that everyone can be better than they were yesterday." Margaret took it, trembling. "Thank you, Eli. I'll always carry it with me." As dusk fell, Naomi and Margaret stood together in the courtyard, watching the last rays of light. Margaret spoke softly. "Naomi, have you ever thought about what would have happened if you hadn't taken that flight that day?" Naomi was silent for a moment, then smiled. "I think sometimes God lets us go through storms, not to punish us, but to teach us how to find the sun again." Margaret nodded, her eyes filling with tears. "And I found it in your kindness." At night, Naomi returned home, her heart as light as a cloud. The three boys were asleep, their breathing even and echoing in the small room. She sat down at the table, opened her notebook, and wrote the last lines. "I have been angry, hurt, and afraid, but today I am only grateful, because without those things, I would not have learned to forgive, and would not have understood that love is also a form of courage." Outside, the night sky was clear and full of stars. The wind gently shook the trees, carrying the scent of sunflowers from the backyard. Naomi looked up, looked out the window, and whispered, "The sky is still the same, only we have changed, and that is the most beautiful thing." In Santa Barbara, Margaret opened her diary and wrote the last line. "Forgiveness does not make me smaller. It sets me free. Thank you, Naomi. Thank you, little Eli. Thank you, sky, where I learned to be human again." She put down her pen and smiled. For the first time in years, she felt at peace. A month later, Naomi's Sky Project speech was shared across platforms. The media dubbed it the kindest speech. Millions watched and cried. A mother in Texas wrote, "I taught my son courage by telling Mrs. Carter's story." A teacher in Chicago shared, "I turned on Sky Project in class, and my students were silent for a long time." And somewhere in the comments, Margaret wrote, "Wounds take time, mistakes take understanding, but kindness never comes too late." Naomi didn't finish reading it, but as Sarah told it, she smiled. She knew that what mattered was not how many times the story was told, but how many people it made stop, look at themselves, and choose love. The story of Naomi and Margaret ends there. No victory or defeat, no glory, just two women, two mothers, who have overcome fear, overcome prejudice, to meet in the sky of those who know how to forgive. The story White Woman Slaps Black Triplets in First Class is not about a slap, but about how people choose to face pain and prejudice in a world full of boundaries and judgment. Dr. Naomi Carter chooses the path of kindness, a quiet strength that endures better than any other. She teaches us that forgiveness is not weakness. Forgiveness is not letting a wound turn into hatred. And true courage lies not in reacting immediately, but in keeping a calm heart in the midst of the storm. The story also makes us wonder when faced with injustice. What will we do? Run away? Get angry or choose to become a small light for others to follow? Naomi not only changed the lives of her 3 children, but also made the whole society look back at how they treat each other. She proves that if just one person dares to choose love, the world becomes a little gentler. And who knows, maybe inside each of us, there is a Naomi waiting to be awakened, a part that knows how to love, forgive, and heal. Thank you and call to the audience. Thank you for accompanying and listening to this story. If you believe that kindness can change the world, please like, share, and subscribe to the channel to help us spread stories that touch the heart. Small things that can make this world better every day.